already had up with what? On was he?
Hi, welcome to In the Arena, a podcast dedicated to educators. This is your host, Brentley Caballero, and I am a senior here at UTSA, majoring in communications. I transferred from Austin Community College last fall, and really look forward to graduating this fall. Upon graduation, I plan on becoming an educator. I plan on teaching middle school, more than likely end up teaching math, but really am open to multiple subjects. My journey in education was not traditional in any sense. I was invited to perform poetry at a public charter school around 2016, 2017. And during that time, I was facilitating workshops for 7th and 8th grade students. And upon completing the facilitation of workshops and the performance, the principal of the school offered me employment. About a month later, when I wrapped up a prep and cooking shift, from a job that I enjoyed, but not as much as performing poetry for young people, I had a call, was delighted to hear that the lack of degree was not going to be an issue and that I will be welcomed onto the staff for the following school year. That was the moment I knew I needed to go back to school, but I was terrified at the prospect. And so I took a year between working at the school to start my degree and start the journey back into education. But with that being said, after a year, I knew for sure that I wanted to be a teacher. And so I entered into ACC, relearned algebra, and relied on the old reading and writing that I've done in the past and up to that point, and made my way back. And here I am. It's been a journey. And so when I decided to become a founding member of the board for They Speak Poetry program here in Austin, Texas, and become a teaching artist, I knew that the end goal was to, work with young people in some capacity. I just didn't think it was going to end up with me at an actual middle school. At the middle school, I was a mentee to a 6th grade ELA lead teacher for a few years, as well as an art teacher. As a mentee, I was able to learn from a lot of different teachers, observing them, being molded on how to construct lesson plan, how to internalize curriculum, learn a whole lot of education jargon. Every industry has their own jargon, from the kitchen to the classroom. And so, luckily, I was provided the opportunity to become a small group teacher. COVID was a tough time all around, but students really suffered in terms of having comprehensive, accessible lesson plans online. And so when students did come back in 2020, 21, there was a lot of learning loss. And luckily there were funds to attempt to make up for that learning loss, and that's where my job came from. But in 2024, those funds had depleted, and unfortunately so did the job opportunity. I somewhat reluctantly returned to my position as a teaching fellow, and as the story goes, was let go sometime after that. And it's been a blessing in disguise, having some distance away from that industry, re-entering the kitchen, applying skills that I learned in education back into the service has been, as useful as it was in the past. But I still want to be a teacher. I still want to be a teacher because, growing up, I had never seen a teacher that looked like me. And that's no shot at the teachers that I did have, maybe some of them, but, I remember being a senior and having a Latino male teacher and remembering that he was the first Latino male teacher that I had ever had. And I really enjoyed his class. And, of course, it wasn't all because he was a Latino male. He could have been a complete butthead. But he was also really passionate about the subject he taught. He taught math. And so it was interesting to see a passionate math teacher. And as fate would have it, I ended up teaching math too. Shortly before being laid off, I was teaching sixth grade math for 2 months because the then math teacher resigned, leaving an opening. And despite being a sub, I was a long-term sub, and so I stayed there for almost 3 months. And it was a really joyous time, and it just affirmed my desire to be a teacher. So one of my goals is not only to become a teacher, but become certified in the state of Texas while getting my master's degree. So hopefully UTSA comes up with some dope programs soon to help educators. But there are a lot of awesome opportunities online elsewhere. I also want to become a grade level teacher. Becoming like a lead teacher is, for me, tantamount to becoming being a point guard on a basketball team. It may seem like you're responsible for everything, but really you're just trying to put other people in the best position to shine. And that's what I really would love to do, because I've seen good people, maybe not great teachers, but good people who had potential to become great teachers leave education because of either a lack of proper training. Maybe they didn't feel like their earning potential was going to be as high in the education sector as compared to other sectors. And so, I really want to be a voice for educators, be a voice in terms of potentially, joining unions, joining groups, lobbying for educator pay, lobbying for educators to have the rights to teach certain things that may be controversial here in the state of Texas. And so, my desire to be an educator is deep, and I know that desire is what pushes me and propels me to, explore this topic, to have a podcast dedicated to educators, because I know that not only do I personally gain from the research that I do, the interviews that I conduct, but hopefully one or a multitude of people could benefit from this podcast, benefit from, exploring the history of Texas educators, learning about the latest policies pertinent to this field, whether that means like the development of curriculum or how teacher pay is chosen, or how rewards are allotted. There are so many components to being an educator in Texas that often go under discussed because, who has the time? Who truly has the time? And so hopefully this podcast can be a way to consolidate relevant research for educators, right? And potential educators. People who, like myself, did not think of becoming a teacher at all. Maybe really enjoy the idea of working with young people, but don't think that going through the hoops of becoming an educator is worthwhile. As someone who is jumping through those hoops, I would say it is worthwhile. It is worthwhile if you like or love helping people, young people, arrive at aha moments, those moments of discovery. And not just teaching them things related to the content that you're responsible for teaching, but teaching them life skills. Or just teaching them or being an example of someone who loves to learn. And so there are so many reasons I want to become a teacher, so many benefits that I think people should consider for entering in the arena of education. And so, yes, that is a brief rundown, brief introduction of my story and why I'm choosing to have this podcast and become an educator. So thank you for joining me on this journey. Please enjoy this upcoming interview with my lovely, passionate, ultra intelligent wife as she shares her insight, experiences in education over her, over her last 10 years. And so thank you for joining in the arena, and hope you keep on coming back, like and subscribe. Hi, welcome to In the Arena, a podcast dedicated to educators across Texas. This is episode 1, and today we have the honor of interviewing one of the most important people in my education journey, my wife, Christina Romero. She is a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin with a focus in theater education. She is currently serving as a multilingual specialist and a founding member of KIPP Austin's Multilingual Education Department. Christina, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me this evening. Want to get straight into it. What inspired you to pursue your career in education?
I started this journey a little over a decade ago in the theater studies program at UT. And it's gotten to be a bit far away from me in terms of how I got into education. But I know that there were a lot of contributing factors, primarily some really important educators in my own life, starting with Mr. Grisham, who is my middle school theater arts teacher. I took theater arts starting in 6th grade. And so that was my first introduction to like a theater arts space and what it meant to be a thespian. And then I continued to pursue theater arts in high school. And I had the privilege of working with the theater arts director there, Sunshine Morgan. And Sunshine is exactly the person you would imagine a person with the name Sunshine to be, right? She is vibrant, she is inspiring, and just really helped to illuminate a path for myself and a vision for myself. So I think the people, the educators who I met along the way have really sort of inspired me to get into education, to stay in education, and then the relationships and the community that I've been able to develop have sort of contributed to my evolution within education.
Did you find that there was skilled translation into education? Going from something that's not teaching kids, for like something like building a set and working on a specific skill to then moving into education?
Absolutely. I think I've been able to apply a lot of what I learned in my experience in the theater studies program, in teaching ELA, in teaching ESL, in teaching visual arts, because in the courses that I took, even if they weren't about teaching, I still had a teacher. So I was always learning from whoever the facilitator was. And so many of those courses involved having a professor model for us how to use specific tools, having a teacher provide us with a vocabulary list of things that we're going to need to know and be familiar with to be successful on a crew, and so all of these different strategies that professors were using to teach the particular skills that I was learning informed how I teach.
Right, you were adding to your teacher toolkit before you even knew you had a toolkit.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I know, and our viewers, listeners will know that you're 10 years in education, which is quite the feat. I've always been told that most people don't make it out after 5 years, and you double that, which is truly remarkable. One of the questions I want to ask you was, how has your perspective on education evolved since you started teaching?
It has had, I think, its highs and lows in terms of feeling apathetic at times, feeling very much like, man, I thought I was going to be able to make a bigger change than this. I went in early on in my educational career feeling very optimistic, a bit naive about how our school system exists and like the parameters within which educators have to work within.
Sure.
And so there were some years there that I started to feel a bit jaded and started to feel like maybe this isn't the right path for me, or maybe I'm not making as big of a difference as I thought I would. But then it would always come back to the kid who I was serving, right? And the population of students who I've been serving for the majority of my career are students who are learning English for the first time, students who are below the poverty line or living with multiple families in one single household home. Some of my students are homeless, And so as I started to learn more about the demographic of my students, I began to realize how critical it is for me to stay in education, because I have seen tons of teacher turnover. I've seen students thrive in spaces where their teachers can speak the language that they speak at home or can connect with them on a cultural level. And I know that those teachers are few and far between because I am one of them and there are not very many of us. And so and so the longer I stay in education, even though there have been those moments of feeling overwhelmed or feeling jaded or feeling like what I'm doing isn't enough, at the end of the day, my perspective about how essential this role is in our society hasn't shifted, right? It's only gotten more, I guess, evident in my career as my career has shifted from teacher to coach to now multilingual specialist. If anything, my perspective on education has become more urgent in terms of the work that needs to get done and how I can use my own experiences to make that change happen here locally.
Sure. I mean, that's a big part of the purpose of this podcast is having, yes, guest experiences, but really inspiring other people to become educators, and as well as, like, of course, informing them about what it's like, and then inspire those who are in the game to stay in the game, right? You're in the arena, we want you to stay in the arena. But of course, people don't stay where they don't feel appreciated or, elephant in the room, properly compensated. So what can you say about the state of education, educators, and economics, right? Is it worth it?
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely worth it. I think educators are underpaid, right? I think that that's something that has been common knowledge. And I think I had some really solid economic opportunities abroad at the start of my teaching career. I went and spent 2 years in China teaching English and performing arts. And I was able to have a salary that's comparable to salaries here in the US while also like spending very little overhead, right? Like I didn't have to pay for an apartment. I didn't have a car note, things like that. And so at the start of my career, I was able to put a lot of money aside and generate a savings. And I don't know if I would feel as confident financially staying in education if I hadn't had those years to sort of develop a savings. And because when I came back to the States, it was difficult to find a job that felt like, okay, this is a reasonable salary for the amount of work that I'm doing. But it's enough, right? It's enough to pay the bills. It's enough to take care of the family. It's enough to still save a little bit. And so is it as much as I think it should be? No. But something that my dad has told me for as long as I can remember, and what I try to remind myself now is to pay myself first. So even if that first year's salary is like 47, 50K, the check's looking super thin. I think the most important thing to consider is like bills are going to come. Things are going to have to get paid. It's important to have something to pull from, even if it's just like I'm giving myself $5 this paycheck. I'm giving myself $25 this paycheck.
Sure.
It'll all stack up. In Texas, we have the TRS, the teacher retirement system, and that stacks up too.
Sure.
I
know for those people graduated with student loans, when they become educators after a certain period of time, those student loans can be forgiven. And that's real money right there. Some people graduated with upwards of $20,000 to $40,000 in student loan. So yeah, that could really pay off. That game plan of going abroad first, was that something that someone suggested to you? Was that something that you kind of came up with on your own?
Yeah, it's something I kind of just fell into. And I thought, man, I just want to get out of here for a little bit, I want to see what else is out there outside of the state. I want to see and understand how education works outside of what I was seeing here in the state of Texas in my student teaching experience. And so I went to a job fair for teachers at UT, and I applied everywhere that wasn't the U.S.
I know these things, but it's still just amazing to hear the story told over again. And, I hope our listeners can find it refreshing to know that there are alternative routes to starting your education career.
I was fresh out of college. I was trying to make good money, and so I went with whatever job offered me the highest salary, and that was in China. And so I ended up in China for 2 years, and I think that experience laid a really solid foundation for me to be able to be a teacher anywhere, because I had to make a lot of instructional pivots. I had to incorporate a lot of improvisational techniques and things from my theater studies program really early on.
This is great because you're getting right into my next question, which is, what are some of the qualities or key qualities that you think makes a good teacher?
Yeah, I think it's really important, if you're going to go into education, to go in and be prepared to be prepared.
Elaborate.
Yes, it's important to be able to be flexible and to think of things on the fly, and to be a quality instructor. You can't just show up one day and be like, all right, kids, this is what we're going to learn today. Something that I've learned working at several different campuses and teaching multiple subject areas is your lesson plan is your script, right? And not every play should be improv, right? Like, some of the best plays and productions put on are very thoroughly scripted. The script has been looked over by multiple people. Edits have been made. The script has been reviewed, memorized. You're putting in your beats. You're deciding where to pause. You're deciding where to take breaths. You're deciding how you're going to engage with the audience. And all of that has to happen in a classroom as well. To be a really solid instructor, you have to be willing to put the work in to plan your lessons ahead of time, to plan for kids to be confused about certain things, to plan how you're going to respond when they're confused about that thing, to plan for how you're going to engage a group of 32, 13-year-olds.
So is that a normal number in the classroom? I know that
right now
the hot topic. Yeah, right now it is. Why is that the case right now?
We have a really big teacher shortage nationwide, and so classrooms are having to accommodate larger class sizes because we have fewer teachers on campus. We have an influx of students enrolling from outside of the country, right? We have a lot of people, and so I think there's an influx of students, an increase in needs, especially post-pandemic, and then a decrease in teachers and the number of people getting their degree in education. And so I think that those numbers are sort of working in opposition of one another, causing this sort of challenging teacher-to-student ratio. So there are a lot of creative ways to get all of those kids invested and engaged in a space, but it takes a lot of ongoing learning. If you're going to be an exceptional educator, you have to be willing to come to the work humbly, and to be willing to learn constantly.
That's a word to the wise, and those that want to become wiser. What would you tell the people who are, in the drudgery or feeling like it's drudgery, feeling like, maybe all the work isn't worth it? You got a word for them?
For sure. I think about a professor I had at UT, Richard Isaacs. He was my scenic design teacher. And he ended the school year by telling all of us who are in the teaching track, teaching is the last great hope. And I think about that often, and I think about him often, because I think it's easy to feel hopeless. It's really easy to feel like the work doesn't matter, but I always go back to Professor Isaac's quote, because I do think that there is infinite hope in the moments that I have with students whenever I can tell that I have actually taught them something and they have actually learned. And so even if it's just one of the hundreds of students that you're working with, that you can be the last great hope for that one kid. And that is, there's no amount of money that could equate to knowing that you've impacted somebody else's life.
Yeah. Thank you. That's beautiful. Christina, thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing your time, your insight, your experiences. This is In the Arena, signing out. Brentley Caballero. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.